Mae Govannen, and welcome my friends to Elven Awakenings, chatting with the Elven Scholar. And now, to your guide to all things Elvish, Dr. Erendil Spindelellis, the Elven Scholar.
Once upon a time, in a forest rich in pine and oak, lived a young elf. He lived amongst his neighbors who were clothed in fur and feather, and found joy and peace with each sunrise, and silence in the evening light of the stars. He spent his days communing with his woodland brothers and sisters, and the nights in contemplation and meditation. Light shone upon him unstained from the mortal world, and he was happy. But as time passed, he became more aware of the land outside, filled with fear and despair, and he knew his time of living in the gentle woods was coming to an end, and his journey as a teacher was upon him. When the morning sun found him again, he walked out of the forest with nothing but the clothes on his back, and strode into the land of man, to teach and to be taught. For it is the way of all teachers that the student so often will be the better master. This is my story, and it is true. My name is Erendil, and I am the Elven Scholar. Mae Govannen, my Elven, Fae, and other kin brothers and sisters. Today is, I hope, going to be a very informative show. We are going to be talking about the Elven soul, or you can substitute Fae or other kin if you'd like. It all works out the same. The Elven soul, how we can heal it, especially in these days, and how this can be used to create a new world for us. As I've described before, a lot of people think that it's the new world is just on the other side. It's almost here. Unfortunately, I have watched predictions throughout human history of we're on the verge. It's going to happen. There will be a new heaven and a new earth. Well, right now, there again, as I will say later, there are 7.5 billion humans on Earth. That means there are 7.5 billion paths being walked right now. And I do not expect, nor have I seen it throughout human history, that this will all come together and produce one big, beautiful world anytime soon. So what's important to know is heal thyself and help your fellows. And that's a way to create a new world for yourself and maybe help a few others find their new world as well. Because what may be a new world for you may not be for them. But what can happen eventually is that a world can be created where everyone accepts each other's world and we all can work and live on common ground. All right, so we're going to start off with what is an Elven soul? So I'm going to wax a little poetic here for a moment. What is the Elven soul? It is not our own. We do not own it. It is not singular. It is one with all the earth and all of nature. We are the trees. We are the deer that walks by. We are the water that flows through the streams. We are but one drop in a great ocean. And how can you discern the drop from the ocean? We are one with everything. There is no separation between us and all of life. And yet so often we separate ourselves in ego and believe that we are something external, something separate from the birds that chirp in the trees and the clouds that fly by. We are simply nature, the earth, the one mind. We are the stars that shine above, and we're the grass that grows beneath our feet. We are not singular. We are not simply alone. We are one aspect of Arta, of the earth, one aspect to remember who you are and remember what you are. You are simply the Elven spirit. There is only one. Again, in Elvish, it's Elianakwen. It means all is one. Okay, and we'll go on with that, and we're going to talk about what exactly does that airy-fairy mumbo-jumbo mean? All right, so I'm going to talk about this today, and we're going to talk about in order, and I've actually had a lot of listeners come back and talk to me about they've got this disease or that disease, and if they could just get through that, so much else would be, and I get it. I've treated patients for over 20 years, and I understand that for a lot of people, they focus on the physical because that's where they hurt. You know, that's where so much of their pain and misery in their life comes from. But I can tell you that in order to heal the physical body, it's important, but you have to go through the soul first. There's an old adage that says all diseases that appear in the physical must first manifest in the spiritual, within the soul. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about healing the elven soul first, before we even bother with healing the body. Because the body will not heal unless we take care of that first. And we're actually going to talk about this from both a spiritual, and a medical point of view, proving that if you don't take care of the spirit first, the body's not going to follow with it. Okay, I can speak about this from a lot of experience, not only as a doctor, but as my personal exploration, my personal journey. Okay, as you probably a lot of you know, and maybe some of you don't, okay, and you may find this extreme, but I am a raw vegan, okay, and I have found that for me, this is the best healthy lifestyle. And I went through years of having a lot of lung issues, many years ago, a lot of lung issues because of breathing in a lot of mold quite a few years ago. And it took a lot to heal the body, to get that mold out of my lungs. And being a raw vegan made a very big difference, but I was also very blessed that I worked not only on the physical level, as a doctor, but I also worked on the spiritual level, working on clearing some of my old karma out of some of my old issues that I've had for a very long time, and clearing those out so that the body was able to heal as well, and it gave the body an opportunity to heal. One of the big things I tell a lot of my patients, and this is the beauty of the body, that there is a blueprint within everybody's body that it can be healed if you give the body what it needs. And sometime in the future we'll talk about healing on a physical level, about some of the aspects and techniques of elven healing. All right, but above all, you start with healing the soul first, or none of the rest of it's going to matter. And again, I'll talk to you about that from an actual really cool medical study that really proved it. Okay, again, talking about myself, it's not meant as bragging. This is simply saying something that we're all capable of. We are all capable of healing. And once you release so much of the past traumas, let the things go. And I talk about that a lot. And the things that you're holding back on and bringing darkness into your life. And I've talked about that in a lot of my videos on YouTube as well. All right, but again, the body has a blueprint. It can heal if you just give it the opportunity. All right, well, here's some actual physical evidence behind this, that it does work. And when you let go of the past traumas and such, for example, again, I've had a lot of patients, and I've been in medical practice over 20 years. And I'll admit, a lot of patients come to me as a last resort. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and a lot of people still don't know what that means. I mean, we have to go to med school, we have to do all the same things, but whereas we can treat pretty much anything, one of our fortes that we do as naturopathic doctors is we focus on chronic issues the most. That seems to be where we seem to shine the best for a lot. And a lot of MDs will agree with me that there's MD, and then there's ND, and then there's other kinds of Ds out there. But MDs have actually come to me, okay, because we each have our place. If I drive my car over a cliff, absolutely, you can get me to the hospital, put my bones back together again, and I'm going to get out of there as quickly as I can, and then use my medicine to heal the bones. But we all have a place, and it's interesting that, I think I've said this before, in a post-operative clinic where I had privileges at some years ago, I was walking around, and an MD came up to me and went, okay, I heard about you. You're the naturopathic doctor. I said, right. And he said, it really upset me, meaning him, that all the years I went through med school, I never learned how to cure chronic diseases, just write prescriptions for them. And so what I thought was really proud of him is he said, well, I've gone back to get my naturopathic certification. And I said, good for you. I mean, there's a place for all of it. And so a lot of patients do not know about naturopathic medicine, and they usually come to us after they've spent a horrendous amount of money and usually fruitless. They don't get anywhere except being on more and more drugs. And so, again, they usually end up coming to me pretty frustrated, pretty angry and scared. Tired they've been through trying for years and years and sometimes decades to find a cure. And now they're pretty angry by the time they get to me. Okay, and what we do is when they come in, we take some time and we go through their intake, going over their issues, and we try to figure out what's going on with them. But one of the most important things we do is we try to talk to them about their spiritual, emotional, and mental health. Because unfortunately, not a lot of doctors out there, and even naturopathic doctors as well, not just MDs, don't take the time to talk to patients about their spiritual, emotional, and mental health as if it has nothing to do with their physical being. It's really sad. There was a survey done quite some years ago that it was a kind of a bottom dollar kind of poll. It was a single poll, single question. And it was asked of all doctors who were in the AMA. And it was very much a bottom line. It was this question: how long can you be with your patient before you begin to lose money? All right, before your practice begins to lose money, before it's no longer profitable with this patient. And it stunned even, I think, the AMA when the average poll came out, the national average for how long an American doctor will spend, and this is not all. There are some wonderful doctors out there that spend a whole lot much time. Okay, ourselves, we try to spend a minimum of a half hour to an hour with each patient. But the average time that a doctor in America spends with their patient came out to 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Now, I can tell you, that is nowhere near enough time to do a proper intake, to find out what's going on. And it is a standard thing with patients that when they come to the doctor, and I absolutely get it, that's why I've never worn a white coat, and with faith I never will, they come in scared. That they're panicking, they've got these phobias. I totally get it. White coat syndrome, it's been nicknamed. And 6 minutes is not enough time for most to remember, I had all these questions I wanted to ask. There's so many things I wanted to say, and oh man, I didn't get time to do it. And most doctors won't take emails. And so that's it until they can eventually make another appointment a month, 2 months down the road. And so most doctors, for example, myself, I might, especially when the clinic was up and running full steam, we might see 10 patients a day. Okay, that was pushing it for us, and we were open all day, but because I only spent so much time with them, a significant amount of time. Whereas the average doctor can see 30, 40, 50 patients a day. And I'm not trying to criticize, I'm just saying that's the kind of environment that exists within Western society, that they're not spending enough time with their patients to find out, how are you feeling today? And I don't mean just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And that never gets discussed. And so then the patient goes home just as frustrated as before. Okay, well, as most of you know, and I've talked about this before, anxiety and depression are extremely on the rise in this country. This is in America, and I know it is within most Western nations. And that alone will wear you down. And most of the time it's because of past traumas and unresolved issues and not coping with what's happening with them today, especially in today's world with all the stress. So people get worn down. All right, and we know that, for example, the adrenals, if they get worn down, then your hormones get out of whack. And, one of the most common conditions today is adrenal fatigue. Hypoadrenia is the medical term for it. People are just exhausted from being under such unrelenting stress without having any type of coping mechanisms to deal with, especially when you feel locked in your home 24/7. All right, well, here's some medical science behind that. Now, what does this have to do with the Elven soul? Because in essence, we all have Elven Fae or otherkin souls. And one of the great problems in the world today is that most people don't recognize that. They don't look at themselves as sacred and special and unique, and how divine your soul is. And that doesn't get addressed very often, that side of their health. So here's a quick medical proof on that, and then we'll go back to just talking about other spiritual things we can do. All right. Again, as I've mentioned before, there is an actual science, and this is an actual medical science. It's not just naturopathic or holistic or alternative. This is an actual science called PNI, and it means psychoneural immunology. Psychoneural immunology. It's an actual medical science that delves into why do happy people seem to heal faster than angry or sad or fearful people? Why do happy patients heal faster? We've known about this for thousands of years, that a happy person gets sick less, and then when they do get sick, they tend to heal faster. All right. So I'll get a little bit more into that, but here's an example of a happy person. And this was written up with the AMA and the Journal for the American Medical Association. This is a very famous case. This is not just urban myth. And this was the story of Norman Cousins. Some of you may have heard about him. He was back around 1964, a very famous case. He was originally hospitalized. He was non-ambulatory. He couldn't get around much, and he had a very, very serious illness. And he had been told that there was a 1 in 500 chance he was going to survive, and he needed to go ahead and start making amends with his family and making plans, and that he had maybe 6 months to live. All right, well, Norman didn't accept that. Norman said, that's not going to happen. And they said, you need to take this seriously. You're going to die. And he said, no, I'm not going to die. I do not accept it. So what did he do right off the bat, right there in the hospital? He fired his doctor, left the hospital, and checked into a hotel. He ascertained that the culture of defeat and over-medication in hospitals was not going to be good for his health. I mean, they're over-medicating him and at the same time saying, well, you're going to die. It's not going to work anyway. So he found a doctor who would work with him as a team member and was helping him with some other things, vitamin C and stuff like that. And it did not oppose with the patient being in charge. All right, and then he did something very, very cool, very unique. And this is definitely an Elven thing because of joy and laughter. Okay, he obtained a movie projector. Remember, this is back in 1964, so they were 8 millimeters. Most of you don't remember these, but they were the bee's knees for us back then. And he obtained it, and again, back then that was no small feat. And he obtained a pile of back then they were funny movies, including the Marx Brothers and Candid Camera shows, Abbott Costello, the list goes on and on, all these funny movies. And what he went on to do is he spent a great deal of time watching these films and laughing. And he didn't just laugh. In spite of being in a lot of constant pain, he made a point of laughing until his very stomach hurt from it. And he laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed. And did it work? Well, he was supposed to be dead in 6 months, and you should know that Mr. Cousins finally died November 30th, 1990 in Los Angeles, California, having survived years longer than his doctors had predicted, 10 years after his first heart attack, 16 years after his collagen illness, and 26 years after his doctors first diagnosed his heart disease. So, laughter, joy, what it really is now. I'm not saying that laughter cures everything, but what I am saying is that joy can heal that soul. And one of the prime things about the Elven soul is, like I said before, we are the otters of the universe. We are meant to love this life and enjoy it and share it with others. Okay, so again, but I have found this also with our patients, especially the ones that come into our practice with very serious issues. And joy becomes a huge thing. Because again, remember, most of them come to me already angry and sad, fearful, depressed. They've lost almost all hope. And it's incredible what joy can do. All right, so making joyous decisions based on love can help heal the spirit, which then manifests in the body. Okay, so is that true? Is that just airy-fairy new age? Okay, well, it's not. Because joy, and I'm going to give you proof, joy is a great adjunct to the healing process. Okay, and it's becoming more and more included in hospitals today. More and more hospitals are beginning to do that. They're beginning to include these types of things, doing more counseling, doing more Reiki work. Just in California, there's over 200 hospitals that now have Reiki as part of their medical treatments, doing work on an energy level, on the Elven level, on the Elven spirit. working on the spirit. So you have to heal your in order, if you want to heal the elven body, you have to start with the elven soul first and heal that first. All right, so as I said, there is an actual science behind this, psychoneural immunology. All right, and what that means is they did some research and found out that they got this big grant to go, okay, why do happy people seem to live longer and heal faster? Well, they actually discovered why. This wasn't not too many years ago. They discovered that there was these little protein messengers, these little messengers, guys and gals running around your brain, and they're called neuropeptides. And every time you think a thought, every time you look around, every time you see something, every time you feel an emotion, you produce billions of these neuropeptides, these little messengers, okay, in your brain, billions a second, just going off. And they run throughout the body. So they thought, okay, all right. Well, we know the immune system has to have something to do with this because happy people heal faster. So that has to do with the immune system. Okay, now we know something about these neuropeptides, that they're little messengers that go throughout the body. Okay, then they finally made the last big step. They found out that there's different kinds of neuropeptides. And they found out that these neuropeptides, the types of them, are based on the emotional state you have at the time you feel or think or see something. All right? So, in general, to kind of dumb this down, there's happy neuropeptides and sad neuropeptides, or positive neuropeptides and negative neuropeptides. And then they found out that, sure enough, the predominant kinds of neuropeptides you make have an effect on your immune system. They found out that the negative, so-called negative neuropeptides actually suppress the immune system. Now, we know that, just about everybody's going to have their happy moments and their sad moments. But what is predominant with you? Are you predominantly a happy, joyful, loving person? Or are you a negative, angry, sad person? I know I've talked about this before, but it's important to mention it because we're talking about healing the elven soul, and that's done with joy. It's done with love, acceptance, letting go. All right? So letting go of guilt and fear, for example. So they found out that the negative ones suppress the immune system. And then they found out that the positive ones actually stimulate the immune system. They actually help the immune system heal faster by being joyful. So what are you predominantly, happy or predominantly sad or angry or fearful? That will make a difference on your immune system. And you know what? Do you, again, as I say pretty much every episode, do you make your decisions based on fear or do you make them on love? And it's as simplistic as it sounds. We need to treat the soul. We need to do it with joy in our lives. It's really sad what's going on today. Today, people are losing such a connection with nature. And I know, again, I've talked about this before because they've been locked up so much. There was an article that I saw not too long ago about a gentleman here in the States that wrote, because of the whole pandemic quarantine thing, that how it affects especially single people, in some ways the worst. And he wrote about how he's a single individual. And in the article he said, I suddenly realized it had been 3 months since I had touched another human being. And that's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. There's no medical basis behind not being with those that you care for. All right? It's very unhealthy, very sad. They did some tests on primates where they took the rhesus monkey babies. Very cruel test, but it did show a lot. And they took them away from their mother at a very young age, and they made sure to give them no physical contact. And what they found was that they literally became psychotic, having no physical contact with anyone else. And then they would turn around, and I know this is a very cruel test, and they turn around and they would take a little stuffed toy that looked like an older rhesus monkey, and they would give it to the babies, and the babies would just glob onto it obsessively and hold on because it craved to be able to touch another. And that's the same way it is with humans. And, I talk about this because, again, we need to heal the soul first, and then the body will heal. And one of the greatest dangers that happens to our soul is to become detached from nature. And we forget who we are. We are children of nature for thousands and thousands of years. This is a very recent thing in human history where humans now live in concrete boxes. We are children of nature. It is who we are in our most basic instincts, right down to the molecular level. We are children of the earth. Edgar Cayce, I've talked about him before with you guys, and I wrote a medical book about him. It was a fascinating time in my life studying at the Edgar Cayce Institute in Virginia. And he he was a sleeping prophet, and you guys can look him up or listen to my past episodes if you want. I don't want to bore you with it again, but it was really interesting that he made a comment one time. Somebody asked him about some of the issues with human nature. And he made the comment that one of the greatest ills, one of the greatest things or detriments that ever happened to humans, one of the worst events that ever happened in human history, is not what you might think. It was the creation of cities. Because you cannot naturally cram so many people, tens to hundreds to thousands of millions of people into a very small area and think that they're going to get along. And so they end up doing what they do out of survival. They end up building walls around themselves just to find some kind of peace and alone time. Yet we crave companionship and we need it. And this pandemic has definitely shown how detrimental it can be. Suicide rates, especially among the very young, is on the rise. So we know that we have to have that companionship and touching and intimacy of another soul. But we also need that alone time. And in the city, some people, they can put themselves in their house or apartment and they never really feel alone because they can still hear the outside world out there. And this is the first time in human history now that people are so adverse to being around each other that they don't even know their neighbor who they've been living next to for 20 years. They don't even know their names. Again, unheard of in human history until the past 100 years or so, and it's been growing ever since. There's a wonderful story, and I've mentioned this in my videos, wonderful story of a young lady, and it was written up in L.A. She's from North Korea, and now she lives in L.A. She was able to get out, and she said how grateful she was to get out of North Korea with the draconian dictatorship, and she was happy to be here and be free, and she loves America, loves being in America. But it's interesting that she said she missed one thing, and that was in North Korea, you go, what could you possibly miss from a country where there's basically no freedom at all? And she said it was the intimacy between friends. And she related a story when she had called a friend. She was here in L.A., and she called a friend on a phone. And when her friend answered, she got mad. She was like, why didn't you just text me? You could have just texted me, and we could have talked that way. And, you didn't have to bother me with a phone call. And the young lady from North Korea, she said, it's because I wanted to hear your voice. She said that's the one thing that she misses from North Korea is because friends there, they don't get together through texts. They don't get together through, smartphones. They get together, they meet at, what they have is coffee shops or wherever they can, and they get together in each other's homes. They hug each other. They have a friendship that goes beyond tech. And unfortunately, here in Western nations, that's disappearing rapidly, and that doesn't feed the soul. It doesn't feed it too well at all. And with the loss of the connection with their nature, it just makes it all the worse. In the past, I've talked a lot about reconnecting. We talked about it in this show also, reconnecting with nature. That's one of the most important things we as elves, or whatever you want to call yourself, needs to do to remember that we are the children of the earth, that we are nothing, so to speak, without our mother. Being connected with nature, being in the trees. I've talked about the health benefits, so I'm not going to get into that now. But another aspect of healing the soul, all right, is, again, as always, perspective and balance. And if you can do that, you can create in your life. For example, a lot of people and a lot of religions say that there's a heaven or there's a hell. And a lot of people will forsake their life with this belief that if they just do certain things, when they die, they're going to go to heaven. And maybe for them they will. And then as for fear of hell, they're trying not to do wrong. Instead of making that choice out of love, going, I don't want to do wrong because I don't want to do wrong. I don't want to cause injury to anyone or harm to anyone. But instead, so many people say, I don't want to go to hell, so I won't do bad things. Even if that's what I want to do, I'm not going to do it. And there's an interesting story about that, a little Zen parable from Japan I'll tell here in just a second. And a lot of people, you want the new world, all right? And so a lot of people say, well, then let's create paradise on earth. All right, okay, but again, because of what you attract, as I've talked about before, if you shine with light, you attract light. If you're dark, you attract darkness. How can you heal the soul and create that paradise on earth? Here's a very cute, a wonderful little story from Japan from hundreds of years ago, and it's called The Gates of Paradise. A soldier named Nobu Shigav came to Hakuin and asked, is there really a paradise and hell? Who are you? Inquired Hakuin. And by the way, Hakuin was a Zen master. And I am a samurai. Okay, Nabu replied. You are a soldier? Exclaimed Hakuin. What kind of ruler would have you as his guard? Your face looks like that of a beggar. Okay, Nobu Shigav became so angry that he began to draw his sword. But Hakuin, the master, continued. So, you have a sword. Your weapon is probably much, much too dull to even cut off my head. As Nabu drew his sword, Hakuin remarked, here opens the gates of hell. At these words, the samurai sheathed his sword and bow and sat upon the ground in shame. And Hakuin said, here opens the gates of paradise. It's up to you. It's your actions. Are your actions the type that would produce a paradise not only for yourself, but for others, or the reverse? And here's one more tale, and we're almost done here for this half hour of the show, or this half, I should say, of the show. And this is about to heal thyself. Try being a part of healing another lost soul. It's a beautiful little tale here. Once upon a time, two men were wandering in the desert, hopelessly lost. Tired and thirsty, they walked up and down and over through the desert. And eventually they came upon a large sand dune. And then when they reached the top, in the distance they noticed something. It was a green oasis of trees and life. Excitedly they ran for it. But when they got close enough to touch, they realized that the oasis was behind a giant stone wall. And on the other side of the wall, they could hear water rushing and birds chirping. They could smell fresh flowers, and above their heads, there were tree branches laden with fresh fruits that were overhanging the wall's edge. With a smile, the first man climbed the wall and disappeared into the garden. With a smile, the other man returned to the desert, seeking other lost travelers. In your life, be kind to the next soul you meet. Perhaps you have the cure for his or her ailment. And when you find paradise on earth, when you find that peace of remembering your soul within, make sure to take others with you. Maybe it is true that you can only save yourself, but with your smile and your goodwill, you can spark the heart of those that are less fortunate than you. That may be one of the greatest ways to create paradise on earth, to create the new world. You heal your soul through living a life shining the light, of letting go of the past, letting go of all the things that have held you back. As I said before, you are in a self-made prison with the key hanging around your neck. I love a a phrase that I heard from the Silver Elves. You can see them on Facebook. They have a wonderful phrase. I believe they came up with it, but no matter what, it's a beautiful phrase. And it says so much to me about if you apply this to your life, you can create that new world, at least for yourself and maybe for those few within your circle. And that is a soulful spirit. What does that mean? All right, I've talked about this before in my YouTube videos. Take you, that you are a coin, okay? That which is truly you, that light within you is a coin. And on one side is the spirit, and on one side is the soul. And you go, well, I thought soul and spirit were the same thing. And they are. They're just different manifestations of the same light that is you, but just different aspects of it. The spirit is your individuality. Even though we are all one, we're speaking from a different perspective here. And as you progress through your lessons in life, as you go from spiritual kindergarten to first grade to second grade and so forth, you're improving your spirit. Your spirit is growing and evolving. And this is more of a knowledge thing as you gain knowledge of the universe and your ability to work within it. Like I said, for example, in one of our episodes about Elven manifestation, your spirit is learning to manifest. And it's a personal growth. And then there's the growth of the soul. When you realize that the world there's more than just you. That the soul says, I need to reach out and help heal others. And so eventually what happens is the spirit and the soul kind of merge and you become a soulful spirit. In other words, a very advanced, evolved, sensitive spirit that reaches out to heal others and to help others. So if you want to create paradise on earth, if you want to create a new world, you do it by being a servant. You heal yourself to the best of your ability, and when it's time to help lead another lost soul back to paradise. You want to make paradise on earth? The best way you can do it is by healing yourself and being a servant to everyone else. All right, we're going to be taking a little station break here in just a few, and then we're going to come back and we will be taking call-ins and questions and comments if you would like. So before we do, I wanted to go ahead and let you know that when we come back from the station break, the phone lines will be active and you will be able to call me and again, this is a U.S. number at 442-227-2187. That's 442-227-2187. And you will be able to call at that when we come back. For those that are not in the United States or Canada, if you try to call that number, most likely it will be with some added fees. So you are also welcome to, and I will be checking it throughout the show. You can email me at radio@elvenscholar.org. radio@elvenscholar.org. You can send your questions or comments, and I'll be happy to look them over during the show and try to address them for you. All right, so we're going to be heading off here in just a few, but I also wanted to go ahead. For those that partook in it last week, I appreciated and loved some of your answers, but we are going into riddle number 2 of our riddle contest. All right, so we have a contest going on right now with us at Elven Scholar and also with Heroes and Mortals Radio. Last week we had a riddle. There's going to be 3 riddles in all. And if you did not answer for last week, you still can answer last week's riddle as well as this one. And then there'll be one more riddle, which will be next week. Whoever gets all 3 riddles first wins the riddle contest. And the winner of the contest receives a complimentary copy of my new book coming out, Elven Awakenings, Zen and the Art of Being Elven. It is a rewrite of my book, Elven Awakenings, and we've added a whole new section to it. We had very good reviews on the first book, and so whoever wins gets a complimentary copy of the book as well as an Elven reading. Okay, so for those that didn't know about last week, here is the riddle from last week, and then I will be giving you the riddle for this week. All right, the riddle was, last week, there is a house. One enters it blind and comes out seeing. What is it? There is a house. One enters it blind and comes out seeing. What is it? All right, that was last week, and again, you still have an opportunity to answer it. You can send all your answers to radio@elvenscholar.org or through the contact form with Heroes and Mortals Radio. This week's riddle. All right, it's an interesting one. I really enjoy this one. Let's see who can get it and head towards the winner of the contest. And by the way, whoever wins the contest gets all three riddles. First will be put in the queue for the grand prize this coming spring. Okay, riddle number 2. A man shaves several times a day, but still has a beard. How can that be? A man shaves several times a day, but still has a beard. How can that be? All right. Go ahead and send your answers to radio@elvenscholar.org or on the contact form with Heroes and Mortals Radio.
Okay, we're going to take a short station break, and when we get back, we will be taking callers for our Chatting with the Elven Scholar. This is Elven Awakenings, Chatting with the Elven Scholar on Heroes and Mortals Radio. We'll be right back. When you go to college, you expect the high halls and libraries filled with old books. But much has changed, and in today's world, online schools have exploded in popularity. Please join us at Lamben Gomor, the world's first online college with a nod towards Elven and humankind alike. With Lamben Gomor, you can start a new career or a new life in the holistic health field, learn a new Elven language, study history and culture, or the environment. We believe everyone deserves an affordable education with personalized attention. We provide full certifications in the following fields: home herbalist, Reiki levels 1 through master, nutritionist, first aid, Elven history and culture, Elven languages with Quenya and Sindarin, anatomy, botany, introduction to archaeology, ecology, astronomy, Elven laws of manifestation and meditation, and we also offer full diplomas in the fields of medical herbalist and medical nutritionist. More classes are being added. Many students have found new careers in the above fields. These classes are sponsored and designed by Tree of Life Holistic Wellness Center, which was the largest naturopathic medical center in the state of California. You can pay for your classes outright or join a low-cost monthly subscription, which allows you to take as many classes as you like at one time while you maintain the subscription. This college was founded to give you a chance to expand your horizons while believing in who you are. All classes are certified and are aimed at helping you start a new life and a new career. Adult study programs for both elves and humankind alike, designed specifically for you. You can find us at www.elvenscholar.org. Discover what is inside of you. Be who you are at Lamben Gomor, the Elven School of Lore Masters.
All right, we're back. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone line in case anybody wants to call with a question or comment. I'm open to either one. We're going to talk about several things during this part of the show. So if a call comes in, I'll go ahead and take a break and take it. Otherwise, you are also welcome to email me at radio@elvenscholar.org, and I will be checking that throughout the rest of the broadcast. Okay, and again, phone number is 442-227-2187, 442-227-2187. All right, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and address some questions and comments that I received from listeners already, and we'll go from there. All right, I had one very sweet young lady send me something, I think it was earlier this morning. She lives in Estonia, so we'll be getting to her here in just a few. Beautiful poem that she sent, very Elven. All right, but I also wanted to talk about a new little series that we're going to be doing on the show. It's just, hold on a minute. I think we've got a call there, so let me go ahead and get that.
Call from Methodil. To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Nasadil, you are on the air. Good to hear from you again, sweetheart.
Hi, good to hear you too. I'd just like to make a comment about spirits and our souls.
Yes.
That we need to be a warrior to protect them. You know what I mean? We have our moments of downtime, which is normal. Just like Gahil Gibran, you don't know happiness unless you know sorrow. You don't know light unless you know dark. So we have to know the both sides, but we need to fight to keep that better part of us, going, through the storms.
You are absolutely correct. You actually mentioned one of my all-time favorite authors, Gahil Gibran. I don't know how many of you guys out there have read any of his works. If you have not, please consider looking him up online. On Amazon, you can get probably his most definitive book is The Prophet. Nasadil, did you ever read that one? Well, it sounds like you did.
Oh, yeah. I love Gahil Gibran.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he was a Lebanese, for those that don't know who he was very Elven in my opinion. He was a Lebanese writer and artist, a wonderful artist back in the early 1900s. And I would classify him very similar to Rumi, another Middle Eastern poet. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? It'd be a great show sometime for me to do that, to talk about Gahil Gibran. He wrote about life and human nature, and what Nasadil is referring to is where he talked about that you take both the highs and the lows that come to you in life. One of my favorite, like you were just saying, Nasadil, one of my favorite prose that he did was he said, because of the depths that you have felt, the deep of the ocean being carved out by your sorrow means more joy in the water that it can fill. And so your sorrow and your joy go hand in hand with each other. How can you know great joy unless you have something to compare it to, and that's great sorrow. And the sorrow doesn't have to be something that forever wounds us. It as you put, as a warrior, right, Nasadil?
Yes.
Yes. The things, the old cliche, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm not saying that we can always take joy in the sorrow that we have, but he also says that if you really look at it, the things that give you great sorrow also give you great joy. And he was trying to let everyone know, take all of the different aspects, all of the different meanings that life can give you, because they all have a purpose. You guys remember, because I got some comments about this, where I talked about the Lithuanian legend of Jūratės and Kastytis, where Jūratės was the mermaid queen of the Baltic Sea, and it was her job to sing of the sorrows of the world, because by listening to that, people could gain wisdom. And Gahil Gibran was saying the same thing, that take joy in both that which gives you sorrow and gives you joy, because they all are trying to teach you something, give you great meaning. Would you agree, Nasadil?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, because 11 years ago, I was at my doctor's office, and she said, okay, you need to sit down. And I said, okay, and she goes, well, I got to tell you this, you have 2 to 3 weeks to live.
Uh-huh. Right.
And I said, okay, and we both cried, and then I fought it. I did whatever I had to do, and 11 years later, I'm still on this end of the earth, I'm not in it.
That's it, and we're very blessed that you're still here, sweetheart. You are absolutely right. If that, and here's an interesting way to look at it. You took, which for most people would be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I have watched this with patients. You will be dead in 2 weeks. And sure enough, they're dead in 2 weeks. Or you have this cousins who I just talked about here in this episode who said, no, I'm not going to be dead in 6 months. I'm going to continue to live. And what you did and what cousins did was you said, no, I'm going to take this as an opportunity for growth, and it's going to make me stronger in the end. And I know a lot about you, Nasadil. You're a student, but you're also a dear friend of ours. And we've watched you grow, and we've watched you be strong, and we've watched you take the knowledge that you've gained in life, and you put it to purpose. So many, it's like I said before, two people can experience the same thing. One will become negative and spiteful and bitter and hateful, and the other one will go ahead and take that experience and go, all right, I experienced this because I had something I needed to learn. People go, go ahead.
What do I have to learn?
Right, exactly. And people go, well, how could it possibly be a learning thing by me having cancer or me having a stroke? I mean, why does that have anything to do with me? But it always does. Nothing happens in your life unless there was a reason, that something you had to learn from that. I know a lot of people will find that hard. They'll go, well, it wasn't my fault that I was abused, or that type of thing. And I totally get that.
No.
Go ahead.
No, because then you can help somebody else who's going through it.
Absolutely.
Somebody else has been abused. You've been there, so you know. So you could tell them, look, this is what I did.
Well,
And I suggest you do that too, or something like that.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I had a wonderful, outstanding patient. She came to us, and her doctor had misdiagnosed her, and we found out what it was, and there's a whole story behind it, and I think I've told it before in a YouTube channel. And she had stage 4 cancer. Her abdomen was just full of cancer. And it was a very fearful, obviously, scary time for herself and her husband. And instead, and to the great compliment to this woman, they told her after we had found the cancer, and then they redid all their tests and went, oops, we were wrong. It wasn't just fat. You actually have cancer. They told her, well, you got 6 months to live unless you do this radical surgery with us and radical chemotherapy. And she's a Jehovah's Witness. And she said, I can't do what you're asking me to do because it would require a lot of blood work, infusions.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, I can't do it. And they said, well, then you're dead. You'll be dead in 6 months. Now, what do a lot of people do when they hear that? They go, oh, okay, well, I will go ahead and get my affairs in order, and I'll sit down and I'll wait to die. And I have seen this so many times, and I imagine you have too, correct?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So, but she didn't. After we found the cancer and her other doctor confirmed that, yep, you do have cancer, she came back to us and said, I want to get better. She said, I want to live. See how she recognized, and this is a rare thing amongst patients, she recognized the sacredness, the beauty, the singular blessing that this life is, and she said, I want to live. And so she followed the program outstanding. Everything went beautiful. We ended up with that stage 4, went to stage 0, everything disappeared, and we were blessed. It was wonderful that it happened.
That's a miracle. That's great. That's a miracle.
Yes, but the real miracle, the real miracle is what you said. This woman who came to us so sheepish, so submissive, so subdued, and such low self-esteem, by the time we were all done, she was a warrior. She fought for herself. She took control of her own life. And I asked her at the end of all this, I said, you are such an incredible example. Would you go on to become an advocate, a health advocate? And anytime somebody wanted something, that girl was in there and she was talking about it, and she was testifying, and she was, and I would tell her, I have a patient who's very, very fearful, very sad. Would you talk to her? And she would. And so what you said was correct. Sometimes what we go through is sometimes it's for our own lessons, but also so that we may become a healer on another level, that we can go and then help others. And
you get that compassion.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've been through it yourself, so you feel what they're going through.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting. I heard this was something I saw in, I think it was a science fiction movie or somewhere. There was a doctor who was very, very cold-hearted, and he had no bedside manner of any compassion, and he didn't do well at all. And it's a movie, so you take it for what it is. But somebody said, you know what? You don't have a lot of compassion for these people. You don't know what it's like. So he shot him. He shot him in the leg. He said, now you understand what it feels like to be shot and injured. Now, yeah, this is a movie, but what it is, according to the flow of the movie, this doctor changed. He went, oh my, that does hurt. And I guess I need to have more compassion. So absolutely, we don't want to go through things, but on the other hand, the earth is filled with deserts and mountains and oceans and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, it's filled with so many things that on first glance could be a very dangerous world. But each and one of these different scenes teaches us something different, not only about the universe, but about ourselves. And great comment, Nasidil. I appreciate it. That was wonderful. And I hope that helps others by you relaying that. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Sweetheart, you have a wonderful and most blessed rest of your Elven day.
You too. Namare.
Namarie. Okay, so that was Nasidil, one of my favorite elves out there. She is a student also, and she takes what she learns and she applies it in her life, and we're very, very proud of her. If you're listening, don't get a big head. We love you, sweetheart. Okay, so I was talking about this new series that we're going to be adding to the show, and I may not be doing it every week, but we will be touching on this, and this is a lot of fun, especially for those who are into Tolkien. All right, and those that aren't into Tolkien, this will still be fascinating because I'm not trying to delve deep into Tolkien. I'm trying to point out something that was brought up in his stories. So the name of the new section of the show will be, Was Tolkien Right? Was Tolkien right? Was he right in some of his stories? Were some of the things in his stories true? And it's really fascinating from this wonderful writer how many things he said were true. And it's not just Tolkien. I mean, Jules Verne. Oh my gosh, the guy was incredible. He predicted so many things, and he was just a science fiction writer. And yet he predicted so many things that came true. Man on the moon and how many people were going to be on the ship. And again, he was just a writer. But I believe that those who have the true gift for writing, and this is a very Elven thing, also have a gift of being a seer. Those who are truly skilled and talented, they are able to bridge into something else, something deeper, and they write from that source. And that source, I believe, is deep within life itself. So this little section is going to be, and again, it can be during this, and you guys are still welcome to call or send emails during the show. But was Tolkien right? And I'm going to go ahead and start with one today that it brings me joy, and I hope you guys like it too. We're going to start off very lighthearted, and that was, do Tolkien's elves have pointy ears? I talked about this an episode or so back, and it's like answering some common questions about Tolkien and elves, well, just to elves in general. And this seems to be a huge point of contention. Do at least Tolkien's elves have pointy ears? All right, so I actually am referring to an article because they laid it out so well. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. But this is from a website called middleearth.zenite.org. And I got to say that the person who wrote this article answered it absolutely wonderfully. So I'm going to kind of read from this, and I'll interject my opinions and so forth as well. And again, this is not against those that like having pointy ears. There are those who, by the little plastic ones, and they put them on their ears, and it's wonderful. It's a way of expressing yourself, and if for you elves have pointy ears, that's awesome. And there's those that go so far as having surgery done, and they actually have their ears pointed. Again, we all must walk our own path at our own pace and express our inner selves how we feel is more appropriate for us. So more power to all of you. I'm just simply answering the question, did Tolkien's elves have pointy ears? And overall, the answer is actually no. Not when you try to say, did they have more pointy ears than mortals did? All right, so the article goes on and it says, no. Tolkien's elves do not have pointy ears. However, we tolerate these endless debates about whether Tolkien's elves had pointy ears because, well, I don't know why anymore. The argument for pointy ears can be summed up as, we're going to ignore the stories and rely on obscure, abandoned, and rejected texts that don't explicitly say Tolkien's elves had pointy ears. And here's some of the facts. At no time during his life did J.R. Tolkien publish anything that said elves have pointy ears. The arguments for pointed ears on Tolkien's elves take a handful of texts out of context. The word elvish comment in a letter was used to describe Bilbo's ears for an illustrator who had never read the book. For example, there was this illustrator and went to Tolkien and said, I want to go ahead and draw Bilbo, illustrate him. How do I do that? What does Bilbo look like? So Tolkien tried to describe to him, Bilbo had, this and this, and he had these kind of clothes, and he's about 3.5 feet tall. Okay, and here was exactly what he said. He said, I picture a fairly human figure, not a kind of fairy rabbit, as some of my British reviewers seem to fancy. Fattish in the stomach, shortish in the leg, a round, jovial face, ears only slightly pointed and elvish, hair short and curly brown, the feet from the ankles down covered with brown, hairy fur. Clothing, green velvet breeches, red or yellow waistcoat, brown or green jacket, gold or brass buttons, and a dark green hood and cloak belonging to a dwarf. Okay, where the argument comes in is that he used the word elvish. Okay, you have to remember that Tolkien didn't like using the word elvish for his description of elves. All right, he didn't care for it because he felt that the word had become so distorted over time. And so when he was referring to elvish and the slightly pointed ears, he was referring to what was currently out in the literature, the drawings and the paintings throughout history that some of them actually showed pointed ears. And so he's saying, well, okay, if you want something to compare with, you can go look at these pictures. I'm not talking about my elves. I'm talking about these elves. That if you want to know what it looks like, well, it kind of looks like the way a lot of people like to describe elves. All right. Because it's interesting that whenever Tolkien describes his elves, and this is the really fascinating part, whenever he described his elves, he never talked about them having pointed ears. He said that the real differences between men and elves, humans and elves, was in their face and in their eyes. He never said, well, okay, Galadriel had these wonderfully beautiful pointed ears. No. He talked about her eyes. He talked about how beautiful her face was, her hair, her eyes. But most of his emphasis was on their faces and on their eyes. That's what he came to. Okay, so again, the article goes on. There can be no doubt that Tolkien pictured his hobbits as having pointed ears. The best representation Tolkien himself drew of Bilbo is in the picture The Eagle's Eyrie, where Bilbo is waking up. It's an old picture that actually Tolkien drew. We can clearly see Bilbo's elongated ear. I'm looking at it right now. Allowing for Tolkien's own self-deprecation, we can argue that the elongation might be unintentionally exaggerated or perhaps unintentionally so for emphasis, because Tolkien didn't really think that he was that good an artist. And so one can argue that he actually didn't mean for it to be that pointed. Okay, as there is no controversy regarding the shape of hobbit ears, people quickly fall to debating whether the hobbit ears are actually an acceptable form of reference for the shape of elvish ears. All right, I get it. Okay, but there's two problems with using the letter to argue that Tolkien's elves had pointy ears. First of all, no Tolkien biographer or researcher has established that anyone at Houghton Mifflin Company, the publisher, had ever seen a Tolkien picture or story depicting elves with pointy ears. Because Tolkien actually drew some elves, but he never drew them with pointy ears. He actually did draw one of them, not just Círdan, but he actually drew one with a beard. Okay, and secondly, the adjective elvish is attested in widespread use going back to at least to Shakespeare's time. And so that's what he was talking about, not his elves, but he was trying to describe to this illustrator something that he could connect with, the illustrator. Okay, well, go look at these pictures, and that'll probably give you a good idea. All right, so there is one interesting area, and he said there's an obscure text where you can find it published by the Elvish Linguistic Society, in which the following is found and often cited. And this is the Quenya language of the word for leaf, lasse. And it was written, it is only applied to certain kinds of leaves, especially those of trees. It would not, for example, be used for a leaf of hyacinths. It is thus possibly related to listen, or for the Elvish word for ear. So a lot of people took that and went, okay, well, Elvish ears looked a little bit like leaves. And Tolkien does mention that. But guess what? Because the question was asked about elves, so he answered elves. But I've got a picture in front of me here right now here in the studio, and it says, many human ears are naturally pointed and leaf-like in shape. So human ears can be pointed. So I wonder what would have happened if someone had looked had talked to Tolkien and said, okay, well, instead of asking the question about do elves have pointy ears, how would he respond if somebody had said, well, do humans have pointy ears? And I'll bet he would have said, well, some of them have round ears, and some of them have leaf-shaped ears, and some of them have slightly pointed ears. So I don't think it really would have mattered. And again, if pointed ears makes you happy, that's just wonderful. I've seen some very beautiful-looking people with pointed ears, whether they were natural or surgical or put on as an extension. Whatever makes you happy, it's your path. This, like I said, this is about, was Tolkien right? What did he say? So future stories in this series is going to be really exciting stuff. Were hobbits real? I'm looking forward to that because you might be surprised at the answer. Were hobbits real? And the stars in Varda, there's actually astronomical proof of something that Tolkien talked about with the creation of stars. That's going to be exciting. Middle-earth geography. Tolkien drew this wonderful geography. Only we found out in the 1990s, Tolkien was right. They actually found proof of that. So that's going to be exciting. And there's so much more we'll be talking about. So we'll be talking about that in between calls and emails and such. Was Tolkien right? Pretty neat stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you guys have any ideas or you've seen some proof or otherwise, please feel free to send it to me at radio@elvenscholar.org. Okay, I'd like to. I kind of did a little bit last week, and I got a good response. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and do another one of my poems. This is something I wrote some time ago. For those that are familiar with, for example, the Tolkien view on elves and Tolkien mythology and the legendarium, there is one of the powers of the world, and her name is Elbereth. She's the one that created the stars, and it is she who so many elves to this day still turn to, since it was the starlight that we first saw when elves first awakened so many thousands of years ago. So I wrote a poem in honor of her and some of the memories and things that I've seen throughout my life. So I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. And the name of the poem is Elbereth Spoke. By singing starlight, twilight ever dim, and shadows of space and ether winds, There lives in time a silence stilled, where life it flows in colors bright. In essence all it stands as one, in mighty force in waters deep. Enchantment lays and magic held, from spatial depths will stand as one. I've seen the birth and death of stars, in places where no man can live, lands that reached and touched the sky, and islands' homes lay beyond the eye. I've walked in lands inlaid with rainbows, and mists would form from legends told, where whales would rise from ocean's depths to teach their young to play. Still in the night her voice would call, and my soul would ask to find the way. In what lands do I seek for you, I'd cry, yet all I heard was a gentle sigh. In worlds without number, its myriad plains, she came in power and legend's doom, Elbereth by name and essence made, to bring to mind of ages past. She spoke of days when time stood still, when day and night were yet to be, and life itself was but a dream, and the God of man a silent being. He made us one and stewards all, with ether lands to fulfill dreams, for from the starlight it was to be, to make the night birds by the sea. By music deep he moved the plains, from shadows day and night became, and in the mist the stars were born, and danced as singing silver sprites. At this time her voice went still, and Elbereth's eyes towards heaven peered. Though shadowed night still held the land, I saw a golden teardrop fall. I thought the night would never end as we stood in elven twilight mist. For long she told of years gone by, and yet for now she had more to tell. I recall the days when stars gave birth and children worlds were held in sway, when waters fell from new-made skies and formed the mighty silent seas. In those days the clouds gave way as falcon birds reclaimed their realms, and silent creatures walked the glades with forest fawns in kingdoms dark. When all the worlds were finally made and mists of heaven cleared the skies, then brightly sang the morning star as the sons of light from sleep awake. Walk with me and let it heal those pains that rise from time to time, and know the love that springs from me is a never-ending lamp of hope. Forever I will be by your side, with arms to hold you through the night. In love and peace we'll find the light of Eru's gifts within our hearts. I'd like to go ahead now and read a little bit of a poem or prose that was sent to us from a dear Elven sister. Her name is Eriana. It literally means gift from God. And she's in Estonia and Europe. And again, Eriana, thank you for submitting this bit of prose and poetry. It was very beautiful. So it's kind of apropos to what we were talking about today. So I'd like to go ahead and read her email and her prose poem that she sent to us. Because she goes, Mae Govannen, my dear Elven brother. Today I wrote a new poem, and I thought that maybe you would want to read it during the show. Okay, the name of the poem is The Elven Perspective of Life. Time for us does not go slow, as we live only in the now. We don't dwell in the past or hold on to the future. Much may happen, but we will remain, as there is no such thing as the elvish bane. Death over us has no claim. We may die for our kin or of a broken heart, but we are meant to live on from the start. When our time is over from this world of men, we will go to the undying lands and never dwell here again. We do have a prophecy that we won't be forgotten forever, because there will come a day when we will come back from Valinor and gather all of our fading kindred who still live in the world. Together we will march towards Valinor, and we will take the men with us, only if they will stay true to their elven hearts. Again, Hanenle, thank you, Eriana, for this beautiful little prose poem that you sent to us. It's story time. Again, one of my favorite times of the show. This is the time when I like to do what I've done so often throughout my life, is to tell stories, to tell parables, something to help teach about a particular lesson or thought. Okay, so I'd like to kind of continue in the same vein as what today's theme was about healing your elven soul and building the world that you want to see around you. That while we may not see a new world come about anytime soon, we can create a new one for ourselves. I talked about in the first half of the show some of the things that we could do to help achieve that kind of healing and to start creating that world for ourselves. I'd like to cover another couple of points, but within the vein of stories. And the first one is about an old Zen story about the Zen monk Banki. And this is the story of right and wrong. He lived around 600 AD or so, and he was renowned for looking at Zen from another perspective and quite simplistic, and that's because that's what life really is. Well, this is the story of right and wrong, and a particular situation that involved Banki. And the reason I'm doing this is because, yes, it's good that we know, so to speak, the difference between right and wrong, but what is that? Just like I talked before about what is really good and bad, what is right and wrong? And that is a very individual perspective. And so if you want to create and to heal this elven soul and to create a better world for yourself, you need to decide, you need to find what really is right and wrong. And maybe it's our perspective on it, and maybe we have misjudged that and have laid so much guilt upon ourselves and upon others. And so this is a story about what really is right and wrong and how we perceive it, and about finding what works for us. And also, so important is to heal your soul, is to make sure you don't judge someone else's. All right, because we don't know where they're at. All you can do is, as I say so many times, we each have our own path to walk at our own pace. All right, so here is the old story from Japan about the Zen master Banki, right and wrong. Pupils from many parts of Japan came to Banki, a renowned Zen master, to learn Zen. During one of these gatherings, a pupil was caught stealing from other pupils' belongings. The matter was reported to the master, but Banki didn't utter a single word. A few days later, the pupil was caught stealing again. This time, angry pupils gathered around the master and said, "Master, we have caught stealing this man from us again. But this time, we want you to expel him from the temple. If you do not expel him, the rest of the students will leave the temple right away." The master thought for a moment and said, "All of you students can differentiate between right and wrong, but this young man cannot. You all will find another school if you like. Therefore, this man needs my help more than anybody else. I'm going to keep him, even if the rest of you leave." A torrent of tears cleansed the face of the pupil who had stolen. All desire to steal had vanished. The others had learned a very valuable lesson. So, watch what you define as right and wrong for yourself. And most important, try not to judge what is right and wrong in others. We don't know what path they're on or where they're at and what tools that they require right now. All right, so that was the lesson of, the little parable of right and wrong. I love the little Zen parables. They very short, simplistic, and yet they carry such a message for us. All right, so the next, I got one more story I'd like to do before we move on to final thoughts for the day. So again, like last week, this is a 2-story story time. And this one is really, It touches me greatly also. I guess a lot of them do. And this is, again, an old Zen tale. I find that the Zen philosophy, as I've mentioned before, really fits well with the Elven philosophy. Remember what we talked about last week about that there really is no such thing as time. It is but a perspective of ours, and we can change everything by simply the way that we perceive things. And Zen is very much the same way. Zen does not believe in time. It believes that all that exists is right now. And you can change your entire life without moving by simply changing your perspective and realizing that all there is now, this very moment, and that literally in the Elven phrase, Ilien the Quain, all is one. Where you begin and I end, it's all just a blur. There is no you or me. We are all just one. All right, so the second story is, again, another Zen parable, and it is called The Alchemist, a tale of the oil and spoon. And this one, again, thank you to Spirit Science YouTube channel. They have donated the audio track to this, so I'm going to go ahead and play this for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back. Enjoy.
A boy went on a journey to seek the wisest man in the land, seeking the secret of happiness. Upon arriving at his home, the boy found a hive of activity. Tradesmen came and went, people were conversing, and a small orchestra was playing soft music. When he approached, the wise man listened to the boy's explanation of why he had come, but responded that he didn't have time just then to explain the secret of happiness. He suggested that the boy look around the palace and return in 2 hours. However, before the boy departed, the wise man handed him a teaspoon that held 2 drops of oil. As you wander around, carry this spoon with you without allowing the oil to spill. The boy began to move throughout the many rooms of the palace, keeping his eyes fixed on the spoon. After 2 hours, he returned to the room where the wise man was, who promptly asked, "Well, did you see the Persian tapestries hanging in my dining hall? The garden that took the master gardener 10 years to create? Or the beautiful parchments in my library?" The boy was embarrassed and confessed that he had observed nothing. His only concern had been to not spill the oil that the wise man had entrusted to him. "Then go back and observe the marvels of my world," said the wise man. "You cannot trust a man if you do not know his house." Relieved, the boy picked up the spoon and returned to his exploration of the palace, this time observing all of the marvels that the wise man had suggested. And upon returning at last, he related in detail everything that had been seen. "But where are the drops of oil that I entrusted to you?" asked the wise man. Looking down at the spoon, he saw that the oil was gone. "Well, there's only one piece of advice I can give you," said the wise man. "The secret to happiness is to see all of the marvels of the world and never forget the drops of oil on the spoon." This parable seemingly speaks to living in balance with our approach to life. While at first it seems like a contradiction, with the wise man sending the boy off on a journey, only to change the reasoning each time, there is evidently much to be seen in the world. But this tale teaches us that we must not lose sight of our primary responsibilities in life while doing so. When the boy doesn't spill the oil, he becomes consumed by it and misses everything around him, missing the beauty of the world. If he is spilling the oil, he's losing sight of his original goal, losing focus because of the things he sees in the world as he moves about. As he becomes distracted by the amazing wonders around him, he loses sight of his purpose and will wander aimlessly. But at the same time, if he focuses too much on the oil, he loses that sense of amazement and wonder that the world can bring. For us, if we were to go about our goals in life mindfully, we would always have time to appreciate the world around us, as in the end, our experiences and memories will be what remain. If, however, we focus only on a single goal and ignore the wider world, then we might rush through life and forget about the journey itself. In other words, this parable teaches us to balance the big picture and small details of our lives and enjoy our surroundings while accomplishing our goals. Enjoy and experience everything the world has to offer and have fun, but never forget the reason you are on your path. Go about your goals mindfully and always put the most important thing in your life today at the top of your to-do list.
very much a story of balance, of finding balance between our enjoyment of life and experiencing it and exploring and adventuring it, because I said before, as elves, we are absolutely the otters of the universe, and it is part of creation to enjoy it and to revel in the beauty of the enchantment of where we're at. But on the other hand, we can't ignore the other parts of our life that need attending to. I mean, it'd be wonderful if we could just sit all day and enjoy and play. And for a lot of us, we are able to create that kind of manifestation, that kind of world for us where we can do that. But for many, until you get to that point, it's a process, it's a balance. As elves, it is incredibly important for us to be able to experience this world. And for so many, they have become disconnected with nature. They've stopped looking around. You know, it's interesting. I mean, lots of studies have been done about smartphones. You know, people have kind of look at the smartphone like the oil in some ways, oil in the spoon. So many people are now, and I've seen it many times in cities and in small towns as well. You get on a bus or you get on a tram or something or a subway, and what do you see? Almost without fail, everyone is looking down at this little electronic device, looking down at their tech. What has happened is that most people have forgotten or never learned to simply look up, to look up at the world and look around them, look away from the tech. The tech is a toy, and it's also a tool. But tools have their place. You are an elf. You are born of this world. You are a part of this world. You are a child of nature. And to look away and don't go outside and don't enjoy it, you miss so much of what's going on. I have a patient right now I am treating for a multitude of other issues, but one of them is she actually has, and she's not that advanced in years, she has arthritis in her neck. Why? Because she's always looking down, either at her computer or smartphones, and she's done it for so many years, she now has arthritis in her neck. As I've told her, I said, get away from the computer, get outside, hug a tree, be that elf that is within you. So this story is about balance, that there are responsibilities that we have to the world and to co-create and to share, but also to be of service to others, while at the same time not forgetting that we are children of this world, and it's here for us to enjoy and to find the balance in all that. Final thoughts for the day. We've talked a lot about healing the elven soul and creating the world that we'd like to create, finding balance. And we just had a couple of short stories about judgmentalness and finding balance and things of that nature, making sure that we focus on what works for us, maybe what we define as right or wrong, or maybe getting past that stage, that tool of needing to define what's right or wrong. Well, this thought is to kind of carry that just one step further. And one of the greatest impediments we have, as I've mentioned before, to creating that new world is judging that world, judging how we believe that it should be. And this is the reason I believe that, maybe for many, many lifetimes of humans, we won't see a new world as the world itself, where it is a global change. I don't think we're going to see that for a long time, because there are 7.5 billion humans on this world and pretty much 7.5 billion different ideas of what the new world should be. And unfortunately, what happens is so many people are not willing to compromise. They want everyone else to have their worldview instead of going, you know what, 7.5 billion people, 7.5 different paths that can be walked and at their own pace. How about I create what works for me, you create what works for you, and maybe we can find some common ground. Maybe we can be, and it's one of the big phrases today, it's quite true, to be all-inclusive, elven, fae, otherkin, pagan, Christian, or whatever. It's well known that even within the elven community there is a lot of division. because this elf believes that we should live this way, and if this elf believes that we're high elves or low elves or light elves or dark elves, and that it should be, the worldview should be my way. Again, I harp on this, but one of the big things that I love about Zen is the lack of duality, that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm enlightened, you're not, because we are all just the same aspect of Eru, of God, of the light, however you want to define it, of the one mind. And the world will never become a global new one until we can learn to accept each other's path and to not judge that. So this is a wonderful little story I've got coming up here. I'm narrating it about an old Japanese tale on the muddy road, and about how we can carry anger and judgment against others for so long that it absolutely damages your elven soul, keeps you from reawakening, and then damages others because of the burden of your judgment that you put on them. So it's a wonderful little story. I'll go ahead and narrate this, and then we'll finish up the thoughts. All right, this is the parable or story, because I suspect that it may have been a true story, of the muddy road, about two monks walking down the road, and it was in a heavy, heavy rain. And they were on their way back home, back to the monastery. All right, so Tanzen and Aikido were once traveling together down a muddy road. The heavy rain was still falling upon them. Coming around a bend, they met a lovely girl in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross the intersection because it had filled up with so much water and her dress was very delicate. Tanzen said immediately, "Come on, girl." Lifting her in his arms, he carried her over the mud to the other side. Aikido did not speak again until that night when they reached a lodging temple. Then he could no longer contain himself. "We monks don't go near females," he told Tanzen, "especially not young and lovely ones. It is dangerous. Why did you do that?" "I left the girl," said Tanzen. "Are you still carrying her?" Oh, so true. Are you still carrying her? Are you still carrying the judgment either of someone else, or even worse, are you carrying the judgment of yourself? I recently heard from another individual how she had been carrying guilt for so many years, actually for decades, and was not letting herself, not forgiving herself, not letting it go. You want to wake up your elven soul. You want to find that peace that you can find by living simply in the now instead of perpetually living in the past with your judgment of others or yourself. Let it go. All that there is now. All you have to do is just let it go and realize that you are already perfect within you if you would just realize it. We each, this is a part of your belief system or not, we each have lived many, many, many lifetimes. I mean, what more forgiving God could you ask for than one that goes, all right, you messed up a little bit, but I'm going to give you another chance. And to be so infinitely loving, the way elves look at God, at Eru, is that we've got all the time in the world. We've got all the time in the world to let it go and to remember who we are and to let our souls heal. All right? So I know it's easier said than done to go ahead and say, well, I'll just let it go. Okay. But sometimes if we just pause and remember that we're not living in the now, we're remaining trapped in the past in our own prison that we have the key for. We can let it go, let go of the judgment of others, let it go of ourselves, and simply live. Look up from the tech. Look up from holding your head down from guilt, and look at the world around you, the beautiful world that was created for us to enjoy, the great otters of the universe. All right, well, that's pretty much it for the day. I've decided to go ahead for next week's episode to take a one-episode break from the deep deep spirituality discussions that we have. So next week is going to be a lot easier, a lot lighter, and a whole lot maybe more practical for some people on a physical level. We're going to go ahead next week and actually start a series that we'll be doing occasionally, not each episode, but going to go ahead and start on the first one. And this is Elven Healing 101, where next week we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about first aid, Elven first aid, actual Elven first aid using natural herbs, natural holistic medications that I'm going to talk to you about and teach you how to make them yourself if you're ever caught in the wilderness and you get hurt or something goes on with you or another person or another animal, actually, for that fact. We'll be telling you a lot of neat case histories about this. And there's no doctor around. I'm going to go ahead and teach you a little bit about Elven medicine, Elven first aid. It's a lot of fun. Going to be learning a lot. So make sure, if you want, that you go ahead and bring along a pad and something to write with. There's going to be a whole lot of information in the next episode in a short period of time. Everything I'm telling you about, I have personally used with both humans and elves, as well as other animals. Everything I'm going to tell you about next week has been used in a practical way and in reality. So, all right. So, again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to, you can always call us at the phone number that I've given out during the show and leave a message. Even though the line will not be active going through, you can still leave a voicemail, or you're welcome to email me at radio@elvenscholar.org and leave your questions or comments, and I will be more than happy to see about covering them on the next episode. All right? As always, thank you for listening, my friends, and until we are together again next week, may you be blessed by the elves. My name is Dr. Arendil Spindalelis, and I am the Elven Scholar. Namavi.
Mae Govannen, my Elven brothers and sisters. My name is the Elven Scholar. Come and join me on our YouTube channel, The Gentle Musings of an Elven Scholar, where we will explore all things mythic. We will delve into topics such as Elven healing and diet, language, culture, spiritual depths, and practical how-to videos on living as an elf in today's world. Let's find that balance within our own true inner light. Thank you, my friends, for watching, and I hope you will take this journey with me.